and Charlotte were getting ready to head home. The horse-drawn carriage that had been prepared was already waiting for them. Fenrir informed Charlotte that he wanted to accompany her. Charlotte then asked Alan about it. Fenrir's parent also had no objection to their child joining them, especially since Fenrir could cover the distance from Alan's house to their home in just an hour. Alan gladly allowed Fenrir to stay with him to accompany Charlotte, considering his home was quite spacious with beautiful paths. Moreover, Alan believed that adding a new member to the family was a good thing. Charlotte was touched to be considered family by Alan, and her cheeks turned red, hinting at deeper feelings. They bid their farewells and got in the carriage, which felt more cramped due to Capybara Naraxa insisting on accompanying them to guard Charlotte. Charlotte was curious about who Capybara Naraxa was and why he knew her. Capybara replied that he was a family member who loved Charlotte, but Alan refuted, saying he never considered him family and told him to return to the zoo. From a distance, a resort servant shouted that if Alan and Charlotte had plans for a honeymoon, he would wait for them at this inn. The horse-drawn carriage sped away with Fenrir trailing behind. Upon arriving at their home, Charlotte invited Lou, Fenrir's beloved, for a walk around the area. Alan instructed Lou to take care of Charlotte, but Lou's response wasn't as friendly when communicating with Charlotte. Ever since returning from their last trip, Lou had become a new member of their family. Gosetsu mentioned that Alan's time to engage in mischief with Charlotte would decrease due to Lou taking up much of it, leaving Alan feeling lonely. When Alan asked how long Gosetsu planned to stay, Gosetsu insisted he was already family, even though Alan never acknowledged it. Gosetsu expressed that Alan's feelings for Charlotte mirrored his own. Alan was taken aback and stuttered, agreeing that his love was familial. Gosetsu teased him. Alan admitted that with Lou around, he did feel somewhat lonely as his time with Charlotte had decreased. However, he was also happy that Charlotte had a new goal, which was to become a monster tamer. That evening, Charlotte asked Alan if she could learn to become a monster tamer. Alan was surprised by Charlotte's enthusiasm, especially since when they first met, she spent hours counting wooden fibers on the floor. Alan agreed to teach her, and Charlotte was very diligent and hardworking. She was competent and quickly grasped the lessons. Late into the night, she would review what she had learned. She also enjoyed exploring the library in Alan's house on her own. She was truly an exceptional student. Since starting her studies on monster taming, Alan discovered a new side of Charlotte every day. Today, Charlotte practiced what she had learned. She tried to communicate with Lou, concentrating for a moment and then starting to use her skills. Immediately, Lou understood her intentions. Lou sprinted swiftly, dodging the lined-up objects that had been prepared, passing barrels, stairs, and benches. Then she turned around, leaped high over Charlotte, and landed perfectly. Everyone was amazed by this display. Yes, Charlotte and Lou successfully completed their training. Charlotte smiled and hugged Lou tightly. Alan was astonished, never expecting Charlotte to succeed, especially since no monster tamer had ever communicated with Fenrir before. Alan praised Charlotte as his sweet, brilliant, and talented student. Hearing this, Gosetsu felt that Alan was being too familiar by calling Charlotte sweet. Startled, Alan told Gosetsu to go back to the zoo. Gosetsu shook his head, stating that this house was now his home. Charlotte petted Lou and gave her a favorite bone treat as a reward for their success. Lou smiled playfully. Alan praised both Charlotte for her brilliance and Lou for her intelligence. He tried to pet Lou, but Lou responded aggressively towards Alan, even attempting to bite him. Charlotte asked Lou not to bite anyone, and Lou nodded in agreement. Alan concluded that only Charlotte could build trust with Lou. Gosetsu agreed, mentioning that Charlotte had reached the level of beast conversation, a magic that turns a monster's heart-spoken words into human speech. Charlotte was already aware of this from her readings. Curious about Gosetsu's ability to speak, Alan suspected magic, but Gosetsu denied it, stating he had self-taught himself human language. Charlotte wanted to try beast conversation, and Alan agreed. After taking a deep breath, Charlotte initiated the magic. She asked Lou to say something, but after several attempts, Lou remained silent. Disheartened, Charlotte felt Alan's comforting touch on her shoulder. Suddenly, Charlotte heard Lou's voice in her mind, telling Alan not to touch her shoulder. Overjoyed, Charlotte hugged Lou for their successful communication. Lou referred to Charlotte as Mama. Alan admitted that Gosetsu was right. Charlotte was indeed special. Alan built a swimming pool for Lou's bathing and also as a treat since Charlotte could communicate with Lou. Charlotte thanked Alan, and she asked Lou to express her gratitude too. Lou softly whispered her thanks. Charlotte requested Lou to repeat it louder. However, Alan intervened, suggesting they all play together instead. Suddenly, Gosetsu jumped into the pool first. Alan scolded him, saying the pool was meant for humans and Fenrir only. He asked Gosetsu to leave and mentioned he would build a special pool for Capybara and Araxa. Gosetsu retorted, saying he was part of the family and shouldn't be discriminated against. As the pool was off-limits for Capybara, Gosetsu transformed into a human form, appearing as a very attractive woman in a swimsuit. Gosetsu mentioned that he used this disguise when he wanted to enjoy tasty human food. Alan was shocked, asking if Gosetsu was a woman. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Lou joyfully played in the water. Alan watched them, relaxing on a bench. He felt peaceful and hoped that future days could be like this. Reflecting on it, Charlotte had indeed changed since they first met. She seemed much happier now. As Alan glanced at Charlotte, he felt his heart racing. He experienced this odd sensation every time he looked at her. Charlotte noticed and asked if Alan was all right. Alan reassured her and asked her to stop playing. With a flick of his finger, a towel landed on Charlotte's head. Charlotte approached Alan, sitting next to him, and thanked him for the pool. Alan considered it a simple task, mentioning that the adjacent plot of land had always been untouched by previous owners. Rumors had it that the previous homeowner disappeared. 30 years ago, the place was inhabited by a peculiar elf who never went to town or socialized. He always sat at his desk working on something. However, one day he vanished. Some said he jumped off a cliff due to his continuous failed experiments, while others believed he was eaten by his own creations. Another rumor suggested his body was covered in fungus for breaking a taboo and that he still haunted the area. Thanks to such rumors, Alan could purchase the residence at a low price. Charlotte looked frightened hearing Alan's eerie tale. Charlotte's gaze shifted to the swimming pool, now covered in mushrooms, with Gosetsu's body hidden underneath. Alan stood up and went to check on Gosetsu, who was clueless about the origin of the mushrooms. Suddenly, a woman emerged from the water channel. She had dark skin and slightly pointed ears, unmistakably an elf. Her disheveled appearance made her look rather peculiar. She yelled at them, accusing them of stealing her mushrooms. Everyone was taken aback by her sudden appearance. They followed the water channel to an underground room. The room was spacious, containing a bed and neatly arranged equipment. The elf woman apologized, mistaking them for mushroom thieves. Her name was Dorothea Grimm Wallenstein. Dorothea had been living beneath Alan's house all this time. Frightened and mistaking her for a ghost, Charlotte clung tightly to Alan. Startled by Charlotte's sudden closeness, Alan nearly fainted. Angry at being mistaken for a ghost, Dorothea demanded to know why they lived above when it belonged to her. Alan inquired if she was the elf who disappeared 30 years ago. Dorothea was shocked, realizing that 30 years had passed. Gosetsu informed them that Dorothea was a dark elf, a rare elf species considered elite among elves. Dark elves could live for 100 years by absorbing magic from the air, without needing food or water. Dorothea, the presumed owner of Alan's residence, had reappeared. Yet, the house had been inhabited by Alan, Charlotte, Lou, and Gosetsu. Alan was concerned, as they had all grown fond of living there. With a fearful expression, Alan asked to clarify the house's ownership. He requested the property be handed over to him. Dorothea happily allowed them to stay, as she preferred the underground space. Alan thanked her and inquired about payment. However, Dorothea didn't require money. Instead, she set a condition. They must help her out of a difficult situation. Initially hesitant and inclined to resolve it with money, Alan eventually agreed after Charlotte and the others pleaded with him. Dorothea was once a renowned author of horror stories, social novels, and history. She had received literary acclaim worldwide and was hailed as a genius for her exceptional works. Once, she tried to write a romance novel but struggled to craft the story. Even as the deadline approached, she couldn't write a single word. Feeling cornered, she escaped for 30 years to avoid her intimidating editor. Upon hearing this tale, Alan, Lou, and Gosetsu viewed her with disdain. To them, Someone who ran away from responsibilities or problems was akin to trash because they lacked the courage to face them. Alan was reluctant to help her. Sensing this, Dorothea whispered to Alan, threatening to retract her offer of residence. Faced with a difficult choice, Alan reluctantly agreed to assist her. Dorothea confessed that meeting Alan and Charlotte had enlightened her. She was confident that a story about Alan and Charlotte would sell well. She aspired to create a happier world through her extraordinary work. Observing Charlotte and Alan, a graceful woman and a seemingly arrogant man, Dorothea believed their dynamic would serve as an intriguing backdrop for her romance novel. Drawing inspiration from their interactions, she began shaping her novel's storyline. Frustrated, Alan asked how he could help her. Delighted, Dorothea proclaimed that Alan and Charlotte would be the protagonists of her novel and urged them to display affection right in front of her. The episode concluded with startled shouts from Alan and Charlotte, shocked by Dorothea's insistence for them to display intimacy.